broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live. We are live on the Fringe FM, TalkStream Live, YouTube, the Paranormal Radio app, all that good stuff. We're back into the late night. It's hump day. Do you guys like the Wednesday night stuff? I don't know. I'm tossed about it because it is hump day though. So tonight we're going to get into consciousness, dream yoga, and the dream state. And why this is important, I'll tell you why. So for those of you that happen to come upon this, put down the doom scroll. I know you want to get to that next video in the next 5 seconds, but I'm asking you to slow down your mind a minute because this part is really cool, what we're about to talk about tonight. There were 3 things that I was doing when I had my first out-of-body experience, an ethereal projection. Those 3 things were, I was listening to the Hemisync tapes by Robert Monroe. I was doing that. I was also doing the ceremonial magic thing, pretty much neophyte stuff, though, banishing rituals, middle pillar kind of stuff. And third, I got into this book by Samael Aun Weor, which is another Gnostic text, so you can take it or leave it. But I took some of the things out of the book. And some of these things that we'll go into in the book, I actually did, and it worked like a charm. Now, I'm not saying that which one worked or if all 3 together worked, but something worked, especially the flying part. And so, we were going to have a guest tonight, but he had to, I guess, reschedule for some reason. Maybe, I don't know. It's a guy that got in a wreck that, had a NDE experience, and I asked him to come on and share his story. And for whatever reason, he was totally down about it. And then maybe something happened. Who knows? We'll find out later. But anyways, I've been saving this one. And this one's it's a short text called Dream Yoga, Consciousness, Astral Projection, and the Transformation of the Dream State. And we'll get into it here. So you might want to sit back and relax and take this in. Of course, we'll discuss it as we go along too, and then I'll give you some psychedelic stuff to look at. So here's the editor's introduction, and I will leave a link in the description too as well. All right. Remember, I was doing this. This stuff worked for me, okay? So the editor's introduction goes like this. This small collection of writings offers practical guidance from the ancient universal knowledge of awakening in the internal worlds. That's where we want to void walk for sure. Otherwise known as dream yoga, lucid dreaming, astral projection, astral travel, or the out-of-body experience. All different states of consciousness, but all together go into what's called dream yoga. And so the purpose of this text, for fair use in research policies, I did purchase this book, by the way, is to empower you with the understanding and skills necessary to acquire your own direct experience of the worlds that exist beyond 3-dimensional matter. As such, this is a, quote, teaching of gnosis, a Greek word which refers to knowledge that one acquires through one's own experience as opposed to knowledge we have heard or been told. Gnosis means to know from your own experience, which is the name of a timeless and universal teaching that has been present in many times and places around the world, appearing with different names and faces, but always teaching the exact science to awaken the consciousness. And so this is going to offer the essential instruction so that anyone, anywhere, regardless of any distinctions, may enter into their own direct knowledge of the living realities that surround us, yet remain inaccessible to the physical senses. So it's natural to our consciousness to dream and imagine, prima materia, yet these are merely the seeds of a greater ability that anyone can develop. In Asian traditions, this science is called dream yoga, derived from the Sanskrit root yug, which implies to join or to unite. Dream yoga teaches how to take advantage of the dream state and utilize it for our spiritual advancement. And although interest in this subject is growing throughout the years, there are many people who have been frustrated in their attempts to have their own personal experience of the internal worlds. reading books or attending seminars usually leaves people or the seeker with more questions and doubts and contradictions. To those persons, we offer the following quote. And this is from the Aquarian Message. We have given many clues in order to consciously travel with the astral body, so thousands of students have learned to travel in their astral body. However, we have seen in practice that those people who cannot quiet the mind, not even for an instant, who are accustomed to hopping from school to school, from lodge to lodge, always inquiring, always preoccupied, are not able to consciously astral travel. And that is a quote by Samael Aun Weor, a very strange man indeed. Therefore, understand that this is according to him, a scientific, practical, and rigorous effort of working with the consciousness. And information is only useful when it's utilized in the right way. We need action and right effort. So the average person faces two tremendous obstacles when investigating the nature of dreaming and the out-of-body experience. One, a lack of effective methods, and two, their own mind. With this text, you have conquered the first step, and here you'll find a series of exercises whose potency has been confirmed by thousands of students. These are not mere theories, they are formula that lead to exact results. And when you put these techniques into activity, the real world begins, the transformation of your own mind, and this starts with the awakening of your consciousness here and now in the physical world, from moment to moment. And without the effort to be consciously awake from moment to moment, dream yoga is impossible. And said another way, the techniques in this book will work for anyone who's making the effort to become consciously awake from moment to moment. But for those who remain dreaming from moment to moment, all day and all night long, these techniques can do nothing. And to awaken consciousness, we must stop dreaming, and this must be in each moment. Another quote by Samael Aun Weor is, when we are in the physical world, we must learn to be awake from moment to moment. We then live awakened and self-conscious from moment to moment in the internal worlds, both during the hours of the sleep of the physical body and also after death. And that is from his book called The Elimination of Satan's Tail. So in other words, if you learn how to awaken your consciousness here and now, then naturally you will awaken consciousness in the internal worlds. And in this way, we make steady progress in the elimination of suffering, the understanding of the mysteries of life and death, and the fulfillment of our true reason for being. All right, so with that introduction to the book, we'll say this for the void walker's sake. Observe. Make sure that anytime what we want to do is we want to take all of these people that are wiser than us, that have experiences, whether it's astral travel, out-of-body experiences, magic, whatever they're doing, and we want to find the parallels about what they're talking about. For example, I'm sure Liam Thomas Christopher, he might be aware of Samael Aun Weor. I don't know. He's my teacher when it comes to magic, but he also said that it's important that we wake up to the dream that we're in now. Not from it, but to it, which is kind of the same message that this book is relaying. Now, as a void walker, I don't want you to take anything, I guess, first base, without checking it out yourself. But I will tell you from my experience, and when I go through this, the ones that worked for me, I will tell you what happened, because I was reading this book when it happened. But first, we have to talk about consciousness. Now, people confuse consciousness with intelligence or with intellect, and thus they qualify a very intelligent or intellectual person as a very cognizant person. But undoubtedly and without fear of deceiving ourselves, we affirm that within a human being, the consciousness is a very particular means of apprehending internal knowledge and is completely independent of any mental activity. So the faculty of consciousness facilitates the knowledge of ourselves. The consciousness grants us the integral knowledge of what is, where it is, and what is really known, and what is certainly ignored. Revolutionary psychology teaches that only the individual by himself can know his own self. So we, yes, only know ourselves. We can only know if we are not cognizant at any given moment. Only by oneself can you know about one's own consciousness and whether it was active or not at any given moment, which is kind of why it's important to journal as well. And only the individual by himself or herself and nobody but themselves can become aware at any given instant, at any given moment. If before that moment, he was not really cognizant, that is, his consciousness was very asleep, and thereafter he will fall asleep again and forget that experience, or will keep it as a memory, as the memory of a strong experience. So it's essential to know that the consciousness within rational animals is not a continuous or permanent entity. Normally, the consciousness within these intellectual animals, mistakenly called humans, sleep profoundly. Thus, the moments in which their consciousness are awake are seldom, very seldom. Yes, intellectual animals work, we drive cars, we marry, we eat, we have sex, we die, etc., with their consciousness totally asleep, and it awakens only in very exceptional moments. Sadly, the life of present human-like people is a life of dreams, yet they believe they are awake and will never admit that they are dreaming. That is, their consciousness is asleep. If any of them were to suddenly awaken, he would feel terribly ashamed of himself. He would immediately comprehend his clownishness, his own buffoonery, since this life is frightfully ludicrous, horribly tragic, and seldomly sublime. If a boxer in the middle of a fight was to unexpectedly awaken, covered in shame, he would see the entire fascinated public, and then, before the astonishment of the sleeping and unconscious multitudes, he would flee from that horrible spectacle. Remember, this is Samael Aun Weor talking here. I wish I could do his accent. When a human being admits that he has his consciousness asleep, you can be sure that he has already begun to awaken. The reactionary schools of old-fashioned psychology that deny the existence of consciousness and that even declare the term useless reveal a most profound state of sleep. Henchmen of such schools snooze very profoundly within an utterly infraconscious and unconscious state. Those who confuse the consciousness with psychological functions, for example, thoughts, feelings, motor impulses, and sensations, are indeed very unconscious. They are profoundly asleep. But those who admit the existence of consciousness and nonetheless utterly deny the different degrees of cognizance reveal their lack of cognizant experience. That is, they reveal their sleeping consciousness, and any person who even for a brief moment awakened his consciousness knows very well by his own experience that different degrees of observable consciousness exist within oneself, namely. Ding, ding, ding. I'll agree with that one. I need a little sound clip for stuff I agree with here. First time, how long did we remain cognizant? Second, frequency. How many times have we awakened our consciousness? And third, the amplitude and penetration. What were we cognizant of? What happened? Revolutionary psychology and the ancient Philokalia affirm that the consciousness can be awakened and made continuous and controllable by means of special kinds of super effort. A fundamental education has its objective, the awakening of consciousness. It is worthless to expend 10 or 15 years of study in school, college, and universities if upon completion of your studies you're still asleep. You're a sleeping automaton. It is no exaggeration to affirm that by means of great effort, intellectual animals can become cognizant of themselves for a brief couple of minutes. Nonetheless, it's clear that in regard to cognizance, there exist remarkable exceptions that we must seek the lantern of Diogenes. Diogenes, this is the way he says it, Diogenes. These remarkable cases are represented by authentic human beings such as Buddha, Jesus, Hermes, Quetzalcoatl, etc. And yes, these founders of religions possess continuous cognizance. That is, they are great enlightened men. And commonly people are not cognizant of themselves, yet have the illusion of being cognizant in a continuous manner. And this illusion is due to memory and all the processes of thought. For example, any individual who practices a retrospective exercise in order to remember their entire life can truly recall, remember the number of times they married, how many children they begot, who their parents were, their teachers, etc. However, this doesn't signify the awakening of their consciousness. This is simply the remembrance of unconscious actions, and that is all. So it's necessary to repeat what we have stated in former chapters. There are 4 states of consciousness, according to Samael. 1, sleep. 2, vigil state. 3, self-cognizance. And 4, objective cognizance. The wretched intellectual animals mistakenly called humans live only in 2 of these states. He's got a very looking down on humans type of speech. The wretched humans, those they're all asleep. And since they expand one half of their life in their bed sleeping and the other half in the wrongly called vigil state, which indeed is sleepwalking, basically, is what we call living. Yet the individual who in bed sleeps and dreams believes that he awakens by merely returning to the vigil state. But he continues dreaming because for him the vigil state is indeed a sleepwalking state. It's just another dream. And this is similar to daybreak. The stars seem to hide when the sun rises, yet they continue to exist even when the physical eyes cannot perceive them. In normal life, the populace knows nothing about self-cognizance and much less about objective cognizance. Nevertheless, people are proud and everyone thinks that they are cognizant of themselves. I'll agree with that. I will agree with that. Yet, yes, intellectual animals firmly believe that they have cognizance of themselves and they would never accept under any circumstances being told that they are actually asleep and that they live unconscious of themselves. Exceptional moments do exist, though, when the intellectual animal awakens, but these moments are very rare. And this awakening can occur in an instance of great danger, or during an intense emotion, or in some new circumstance, or in some new unexpected situation. But nonetheless, it is indeed a disgrace that the intellectual animal does not have any control over those fleeting states of awakened consciousness, and that he cannot evoke them in order to make them continuous. But these fundamentals of Gnostic education affirm that any individual can acquire control over his consciousness and thus attain self-cognizance. Yes, this revolutionary psychology has methods, scientific processes to awaken the consciousness. You know, I forgot to mention something that this guy definitely sounds like, what's up, Grant? Sudi. This guy sounds like and Deacon Beancooter. This guy sounds like a evil villain, kind of. Like if you ever heard him speak, he sounds like an evil villain for sure. All right, so it's necessary to know that, and this is good stuff. So just take the good with the bad. You know, forget his attitude and all that stuff, because there's a lot of good stuff in here. So it's necessary to know that humanity lives with its consciousness asleep. People work asleep. People walk through the streets asleep. People live and die asleep. But when we come to the conclusion that the entire world lives asleep, then we can comprehend the necessity of awakening. So we need the awakening of consciousness. We want the awakening of consciousness. And so let's talk about fascination. The profound sleep in which humanity lives is called and caused by fascination, actually. So people are fascinated by everything in life, and people forget themselves because they are fascinated. The drunkard in the bar is fascinated with the alcohol, the place, the pleasure, his friends, and the women. The vain woman in front of a mirror is fascinated with her own glamour and her looks. The rich guy is this person's fascinated with money and possessions. The honest worker in the factory is fascinated with the hard work that they're doing. The father of the family is fascinated with their children. All human beings are fascinated and sleep. When you drive a car, we are astonished when we see people dashing across the roads and streets without paying attention to the danger of running into cars. Others willfully throw themselves under the wheels of cars. All these poor people walk asleep. They look like sleepwalkers. They walk asleep, endangering their own lives, and any clairvoyant can see their dreams. And people dream with all that keeps them fascinated. So fascination is something that we have to look at that kind of distracts us from being conscious. And then sleep. Now, during the physical body's sleep, the ego escapes from it. And this departure of the ego is necessary so that the vital body can repair the physical body. However, in the internal worlds, we can asseverate that the ego takes its dreams into the internal worlds. So while in the internal worlds, the ego occupies itself with the same thing which keeps it fascinated in the physical world. So even during a sound sleep, we see the carpenter in his carpentry shop, or the policeman guarding the streets, or the barber in his barber shop, the blacksmith in his forge, the drunkard in the tavern or bar, the prostitute in the house of pleasures, absorbed in lust, etc. All these people live in the internal worlds as if they were in the physical world. And during his sleep, not a single living being has the inkling to ask himself whether he is in the physical world or astral world. And I'm asking you right now as you're listening to this, whether it be on the radio, TuneIn, TalkStream Live, Facebook, YouTube, wherever we're broadcasting at, do you know right now if you are in the physical world or astral world? Right now. Those who have asked themselves such a question during sleep have awoken in the internal worlds. Then, with amazement, they have been able to study all the marvels of the superior worlds. So it's only possible for us to ask a question of ourselves in the superior worlds during those hours of sleep if we accustom ourselves to ask this question from moment to moment during the so-called waking or vigil state. And evidently, during our sleep, we repeat everything that we do during the day. So if during the day we accustom ourselves to asking this question, then during our sleep, while being outside of the body, we will consequently repeat the same question to ourselves. Thus, the outcome will be the awakening of the consciousness. Are you awake right now? Are you in the astral world right now? Are you in the dream world? Are you in the vigil waking state, so-called waking state? So let's talk about remembering oneself. The human being in his fascinated trance does not remember himself. We must self-remember ourselves from moment to moment. We need to self-remember ourselves in the presence of every representation that could fascinate us. So let us hold ourselves while in front of any representation and ask ourselves, where am I? Am I in the physical plane? Am I in the astral plane? And here's the cool part. Then give a little jump with the intention of floating within the surrounding atmosphere. Now, it's logical that if you float, it's because you're outside the physical body. Thus, the outcome will be the awakening of consciousness. Now, the purpose of asking this question at every instant, at every moment, is with the intention of engraving it within the subconscious, so that it may manifest later during the hours of given sleep, or the hours when the ego is really outside the physical body, quote, outside the physical body. But you must know that in the astral plane, things appear just as they are here in the physical plane. This is why during sleep and after death, people see everything there in a form very similar to the physical world. This is why they do not even suspect that they are outside of their body when they die. Therefore, no dead person ever believes himself to have died because he is fascinated and profoundly asleep. So this is something that I actually started doing when I had my first OBE experience. So after I read this book, now this was years ago, but after I read this book, I would literally go outside. Well, it really didn't matter, but I had a spot outside that I would ask myself every day, am I asleep or am I in the astral realm? And then I would literally try to jump and float. Now, you can't float in the vigil state or awakened state, but there's this like weird thing inside me, kind of like the boy who could fly, who was trying to float. And I know I looked ridiculous to my neighbors, but I didn't care. Like, I was obsessed with this whole thing. And it gets better. Maybe if you're worried about what people think, maybe go in your backyard and do it or something. Or every now and then, if you're in your room by yourself, just give a little jump and try to float and ask those questions. Now, if the dead people had made a practice of remembering themselves from moment to moment when they were alive, and this is important, if they had struggled against the fascination of things in the world, the outcome would have been the awakening of their consciousness. They wouldn't dream. They would walk in the internal worlds with awakened consciousness. And whosoever awakens the consciousness can study all the marvels of the superior worlds during the hours of sleep. Whosoever awakens their consciousness lives in the superior worlds as a totally awakened citizen of the cosmos. One then coexists with the great hierophants of the White Lodge. The great hierophants of the White Lodge. See, all this stuff is cool, and then they add that right on the back end, which kind of, it's like, okay. Now, whosoever awakens the consciousness can go no longer dream here in this physical plane or in the internal worlds. Whosoever awakens the consciousness stops dreaming, period. And when you awaken your consciousness, you become a competent investigator of the superior worlds. When you awaken it, your consciousness becomes illuminated. So they call you an illuminated one. To be illuminated, not in the Illuminati sense of trying to control people, but to really be illuminated means to be awake all the time, to never forget, to know where you are, what you are, where you are, and what state you're in at all times, what level of consciousness you are, moment to moment. And he says this, whosoever awakens the consciousness can study at the feet of the master. And when you awaken it, you can talk familiarly with the gods who initiated the dawn of creation. Now that's the whole, that's a whole other thing, but that's what he's saying. So when you awaken your consciousness, you can remember your innumerable reincarnations, all of them. When you awake, you can consciously attend your own cosmic initiations. When you awake, you can study in the temples of the Great White Lodge. And when you awake, you can know in the superior worlds the evolution of your kundalini, your force. And every perfect matrimony must awaken their consciousness in order to receive guidance and direction from the White Lodge. In the superior worlds, the masters will wisely guide all those who really love one another. It is important to really, truly love one another. In the superior worlds, the masters give to each one that which one needs for his inner development. So let's talk about some complementary practices. So every Gnostic student, after waking from their normal sleep, must perform a retrospective exercise based on the process of their sleep. So in order to remember all those places that you visited during your hours of sleep, we already know that your ego travels a great deal. So it goes towards where you have physically been, repeating all that which have you seen and heard. And so the masters instructed their disciples when they are out of the physical body. So therefore, it's urgent to know how to profoundly meditate and then practice what we have learned during these hours of sleep. It's also necessary not to physically move when you awaken. So this is pretty important too. Forget all the religious and like super Gnostic jargon. But what he just said right there, when you wake up, don't move. Because with movement, the astral body gets agitated and the memories start to become lost. It's urgent to combine the retrospective exercises with the following mantras. And so he gives some mantras like Realm Gaum, which is R-A-O-M-G-A-O-M. And it's derived in 2 syllables, and one, you got to attenuate the vowels. But those are for Gnostic students when they say it's like dynamite for the minor. So that helps you open your way through the bowels of the earth with the aid of the dynamite, just like this mantra would help you gain your way into your memories and your subconsciousness. But if you want to do a mantra, that's cool. But the part where he says, don't move. Like when you wake up, my first instinct when I wake up is to get the hell up and start doing stuff, or just lay there because I don't want to wake up. But if you can really, like, when you wake up, even don't, like, at first, just don't move and try to remember your dreams as best you can, and then write them down in your journal. And then after a while, if you get really good at it, which I never got this good at it, but there's I think it's called somnambulism, but no, it's not. It's called, there's a word for it, hypnopompic or something. But when you wake up, if you can get to that place where, like, you don't even open your eyes, like, it's really hard to do. But it's like, if you can get to that place, you can do any of this stuff. So when you wake up, catch yourself before you open your eyes the first time, and just don't open them, and just be completely still and try to remember everything that just happened. Now, you're not going to get to that level without practicing this stuff during your waking state too, but if you work on it, you'll get there eventually. And yes, this will definitely help with out-of-body experiences. It helps with all of it, every bit of it. What's up, Robo? What's up, April? Wah. Hey, y'all. All right. I know that sucks, right? But even he says the Gnostic student must be infinitely patient and tenacious, because powers cost a great deal. Nothing is given to us for free. Everything has a price. So these studies are not for inconsistent people, nor for people of fragile will. These studies demand infinite faith. And skeptical people must not come to our studies, because occult science is very demanding. The skeptics fail totally. Thus, skeptical people will not succeed in entering the heavenly Jerusalem, he says. But let's just look at it like from a consciousness thing, okay? What he's saying about being tenacious and vigilant, like, you could take all this religious and conscious and gnosis stuff out of here and just do the basic, like, fundamental practices he's talking about, and things will begin to happen. And the more you do them, the more you practice them, the more you make it your spiritual practice to awaken in both states, in all states. It's almost like you kind of got to be obsessed with it. You do have to have, at least at first, like, you do have to have kind of a strong will about it. Because if you're like me and you got ADD and you get distracted by a squirrel, or, you can't just do the same things every day because it's too boring because you're not getting results. Like, this is hard stuff. But once it unlocks, it's so freaking cool. All right. So on dreams, and he's got a little, let me see if I can pull this up. So this is some kind of Gnostic diagram, I think. Yeah. I don't know why it's not. Let me go back to, okay. So Gnosis teaches that the modern decadent psychology for the Western Hemisphere is ignorant of various kinds of dreams that exist. Dreams have a diverse and specific quality, for they are closely related to each of the psychic centers of the human body. So in the picture, you can see he's got an intellectual superior right there where the pineal gland is, one in the throat, one in the, I guess you could say the chest or solar plexus, and kind of one in the, one in the chest, one in the solar plexus, and one in the sexual center. Intellectual's in the head, and your chest is your emotional, and the head and the chest both have a superior and inferior level of energy. All right. But dreams have a diverse and specific quality. They're closely related to each of the psychic centers of the human body. In fact, we do not exaggerate when we state that most dreams are linked to the motor instinctive center. That is, they are the echoes of everything that we see during the day. Simple sensations and motions, a mere astral repetition of our daily life. You can catch a cat dreaming, doing the same thing. Some experiences of an emotional type, such as fear, which humans we have a lot of, usually fit in those chaotic dreams of the motor instinctive centers as well. And I guess the motor, he's kind of shown the motor, it's not in the throat, it's in the, looks like the cerebral cortex there, or whatever you call it. So there are then emotional, sexual, intellectual, motor, and instinctive dreams. These energies are a part of all of our dreams. Now, let me pause there, okay? Because I'm not just going to read through this book without saying one thing. What other person has mentioned that? That you know these two people haven't talked, but we've read their books. Is there a parallel? Most definitely, right? Robert Monroe, William Buellman, the just quote scientific astral travelers that don't get into any religious beliefs or anything like that, right? Especially Monroe, definitely contacted emotional and sexual parts in his OBE experiences. So whether it's a lucid dream, astral travel, or etheric OBE projection, these are all states in the consciousness experience. And they're at certain levels. So the more important dreams, according to Samael, he says, the inner experiences of the being are associated with the two centers, the superior emotional and the superior intellectual, which would be the top yellow and the top blue in the diagram. Dreams related to the superior centers are certainly interesting. Their main features is what we could call a dramatic array. Now then, if we think of the ray of creation, the superior and inferior centers, and the influences descending through the sided cosmic ray, we must admit that some luminous vibration appears. These intend to heal us, to inform us about the state in which we are and more. So it becomes useful to receive messages and to be in contact, according to Samael, with the Aztec, Mayan, Toltec, Egyptian, and Greek adepts. Now, in Samael's Gnostic teachings and all his books, and even in his tarot deck, you're going to see symbols from Aztec, Mayan, Toltec, Egyptian, and Greek. And it is marvelous as well to have intimate dialogue with the highest diverse parts of our being. So if you think that's cool, but you don't want to like follow a spiritual belief, just think about like what Liam's talking about, how you have, like we all probably have some of this stuff, these teachings, or at least the history of whether it be Aztec, Mayan, Egyptian, Greek, or something of that nature embedded into our cell memory. So it's marvelous. The superior centers are fully developed in us, and they send us messages with which we must learn to consciously grasp. So in this chapter, those select people who have had a moment of self-remembrance in which they, they saw a common thing or a person in totality a different way. Maybe it was a deja vu experience, or maybe you met someone that, I know you, or you just remembered something about yourself that has nothing to do with this life. Probably wouldn't be surprised if I tell them that such moments have the same quality as one of those rare and strange dreams related to two superior centers, the emotional and intellectual. The meaning of such transcendental dreams matches undoubtedly the same level of realization in oneself of the ray of creation, and in particular the lateral octave of the sun. The beginning of our realization of the deep significance of this specific type of dream is the signal that comes, or the signal that some forces struggle to awaken or to heal or cure us. Each of us is a mathematical point in space that is used as a vehicle by determined sums of values, black or white. That's a trippy thing he just said. So think about fractals for a second, or any psychedelic experience you've had. So he just said, from a Gnostic point of view, which is an ancient kind of teaching thing, that each of us is a mathematical point in space that is used as a vehicle by determined sums of values, black or white. Death is a subtraction of fractions. Once the mathematical operation is complete, the only thing left are the values, good or bad, black or white. In accordance with the law of eternal return, if it is certain that the values return, they are re-embodied. Thus we get karma, or cell memory, or ancestral junk. So if a man starts taking into account more consciously the small cycle of recurring events of his personal life, he will be able to verify directly through mystical experience that in daily sleep, the same mathematical operation of death is always repeated. In the absence of the physical body during normal sleep, the values merge into the astral light and attract or repel each other in accordance with the law of universal magnetization or magnetization. He just talks about this stuff like it's so easy to understand. I don't really totally understand what he's saying there, but it does make me think about some things like I said, fractals. It makes me think about the simulation theory, the whole idea of bits on and off and all this other stuff, relativity, alpha and omega, all that stuff. It makes me think about that. But in the absence of the physical body during normal sleep, he says these values merge in the astral light and attract or repel each other in accordance with the law of magnetization. Now, that sounds crazy, but who else says that? Who else? What other person said that in a book that we read? It has nothing to do with Gnosis, nothing to do with Samael Aun Weor, but say the exact same thing. Both are conscious explorers. Of course, the other one's Monroe, and the other one is William Buellman as well. You remember in his first book, in Journeys Out of the Body, and in William's first book too, they talk about this like attracts like. Basically, whatever you're putting out, you're going to attract in this realm. Like attracts like. And you can either attract it or you'll repel it, depending on what's going on. But so the return of the waking or vigil state rightfully implies the return of the values to the interior of the physical body. So when you, quote, wake up in your physical body, these things kind of return back to your body and balance out. So extraordinarily, people think that they only interrelate with the external world. But Gnosis teaches us that we interrelate with the inner worlds too, which is invisible to the physical, ordinary senses, but visible to clairvoyance. And it's always there, just like the sun is still there even at nighttime. It's just under the earth, right? So the inner invisible world is much wider, and it contains many more interesting things than the external world where the 5 windows of the senses are always opened, or nerve senses. So many dreams relate to the place where we are in the inner invisible world from which the diverse circumstance of life comes forth. The language of dreams is accurately comparable to the language of parables. Those who interpret everything literally think that the sower of the Christic gospel in the Bible went to sow, and that the seeds fell on rocks and so on, but they do not understand the sense of the parable because it belongs to the symbolic language of the superior emotional center. And needless to say here that any dream, as absurd or incoherent as it may be, has some significance, for it indicates not only the psychic center to which it is associated, but also the psychological status of that center. And many penitent people who presumed to be chaste failed in the sexual center and had a nocturnal pollution when they were submitted to trials in the internal world. In other words, they were trying to stay chaste, but they couldn't do it. They were trying, so they had a nocturnal pollution when they were submitted to trials in the internal world. So when they failed in the exterior world, in the dream world, they had some kind of crazy nocturnal pollution. Which, you know, man, that's a whole big subject, but I understand what he's saying. So in the perfect adept, the 5 psychic centers, intellectual, emotional, motor, instinctive, and sexual functions in full harmony are within harmony of the infinite. It's balanced. So what's our mental activity during sleep? What emotions move or shatter us? What are our activities outside the physical body? What instinctive sensations predominate us? And have we considered our sexual states during this sleep? So we must be sincere and really deeply honest with ourselves. And Plato rightfully said, a man is known by his dreams. And the matter of the erroneous work of the centers is a topic that demands a lifetime of study by the way of observation of oneself and action and of the rigorous examination of your dreams. Anybody else say that we need to do work in the dream world that's in another spiritual belief besides Gnosis that you guys remember on this show about 100 of them probably. Lots of them don't know each other, don't even believe in the same things, but it is a common belief. Therefore, in my opinion, it must have some common sense, or at least a little bit closer to ultimate truth. It's not possible to achieve the understanding of the centers and their correct or incorrect function in an instant. We need infinite patience. All of life unfolds as a function of the centers and is controlled by these centers. Everything we do in life is coming from these energies in that picture. Everything we do has some form of control or means by which these centers are working. Maybe I can find it again. Yeah, there they are. And even in the book Psychic Self-Defense, I'm pretty sure Dion Fortune mentions a lot of these centers in that book as well. How can you possibly be psychic attacked? Well, there's certain energies that you can be. Our thoughts, ideas, feelings, hopes, fears, love, hatred, deeds, sensations, pleasure, satisfactions, frustrations, etc. are found in these centers, in these energetic centers. And you can feel them. This isn't some kind of, I mean, if you want to call them chakras, you can, but this, you can feel, you can feel it in your body, in your nervous system. Obviously, you can't feel your brain unless you take a bunch of speed. And the only way that you know that that's working is, when cops do that sobriety test and they tell you to lean back and stand up. They tell you to lean back and look up, right? And they'll say, when 30 seconds, I want you to count to 30 seconds by yourself, alone. And then when 30 seconds is over, let me know. And the cop will count 30 seconds on his watch. And if you come down before 30 seconds is up, it's a fact to them that you're high on some kind of speed or stimulant because your brain's sped up. Your reality is completely different than theirs. You're not even in sync with the correct time. And people that are on speed can't count that. They cannot stand to be bored. They have to be just, trust me, I know, I did a bunch of it. All right. So the discovery of some inhuman element in any of these centers must be the strongest motive for your esoteric work. Any psychological defect must be previously understood by way of the technique of meditation before proceeding to its elimination. The extirpation, eradication, or elimination of any undesirable element is only possible by invoking what does he call this? Tananatan's aid, or our divine Mother Kundalini, a variation of our own being or particular fohat of each of us. We can get into that later, what all that stuff is, but this is how we die from moment to moment. Only death brings forth what is new. So influence of all kinds reach us in the levels of being and things if we have understood the ray of creation. We also acknowledge that in any instant of life, influences which are of various qualities reach us. So we must always be aware that there are superior influences that act upon us, and we are recorded by our psychics, and those influences, those things that act upon us, get recorded by our psychic system. And if we are nevertheless attached to our senses, and we do not pay full attention to our inner life, we will not be able to perceive these influences. So what is he telling you there? I think basically he's telling you that you are getting programmed not only just by your subconscious, but also like if you're not aware of when this stuff happens, and where you feel it and what center it happens to, then you're being, you're just being pulled by, it's almost like you're a puppet on a string. Then he has a symbol. He talks about creation. Of course, Gnostics are going to say the same thing. Creation is represented by the tree of life. Has some different variations to it, but you can still see the lightning flash, the clip off, the other tree, stuff like that, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's get into what's next. Dreams and visions. Yeah. What time is it? All right, I'll do this one, then I won't have to take a break here real quick. Dreams and visions. Okay, so Gnostic students must learn to differentiate between dreams and visions. To dream is one thing, and to have a vision's another thing. A truly awakened Gnostic cannot dream, and only those who have the conscious or their consciousness asleep live dreaming. So the worst type of dreamer is the sexual dreamer. Those who live dreaming of carnal passions stupidly waste their creative energy and the satisfaction of their fantastic pleasures. And ordinarily, these people do not progress in their business. They fail in every sense, and they end up in misery. I don't sound like Crowley, maybe, but when we look at pornographic images, it strikes the senses and then passes to the mind. The psychological eye intervenes in these affairs by stealing the erotic image in order to reproduce it in the mental plane. Thus, in the world of the mind, that image is transformed into a living effigy in that world. And during sleep, the dreamer fornicates with that living effigy, which, like an erotic demon, tempts the dreamer for the satisfaction of the lust. The outcomes is wet dreams with all their horrible consequences. And therefore, the true devotees of the Gnostic path must not visit cinemas because they are dens of black magic. The erotic figures of the screen gives rise to mental effigies and erotic dreams. In addition, the cinemas are full of diabolic elementals created by the human mind, and those malignant elementals damage the mind of the spectators. That is all Samael Aun Weor talking. Whatever you do sexually, I don't give a damn. But I will say to that, like, pay attention to the cause and effect of what happens. Like, if you were to really be in touch with your energy, those centers in the body, your dream world, your waking world, just pay attention to what happens. It doesn't have to be a demon. It could just be like cause and effect, but whatever. All right, so the subconscious mind creates fantastic dreams within the realm of dreams. And the quality of dreams depends on the belief of the dreamer or the dreamer. So when someone believes that we are good, he dreams about us seeing us as angels. And when someone believes we are bad, he dreams about us seeing us in the form of a devil. You remember that guy that Monroe ran into that was out of body, and he called him, he thought that Robert Monroe was Satan. And this is why, like, when all these different people have near-death experience stories, usually you'll read an article about it and it'll validate someone's religion or something like that. But if you pay attention, they're all different. They're having all different experiences. There are some things that are the same, but depending on what they're taking with them in their psychic centers, their beliefs and their subconscious is what they're going to experience. So just like one person sees Monroe as like the kid saw him as an astral traveler or whatever that was kind of happy to see him, another person thought he was Satan. There was no difference. It's just perception. So many things come into our memory whilst writing these lines. So in the past, we, the brethren, worked in various countries, and we were able to observe that while our Gnostic disciples believed in us, they dreamed seeing us as angels. And it was sufficient for them to stop believing in us for them to then dream about us being demons. And those who swore before the altar to follow and obey us admired us with great enthusiasm and dreamed seeing us as being angels. And many times it was enough for those students to have read a book or have listened to some lecture in order for them to become affiliated with a new school. Oh yeah, a big thing I forgot to mention here. So do you know who Samael Aun Weor claims to be? I didn't want to say this. I was going to wait till I got done with the book before I told you. But he claims to be Samael, or an incarnation of Samael, the angel, which is really one of the angels, according to him, I believe, of Mars. Not a fun place. A severe, powerful energy. So I think he's actually talking to himself like as if he's about himself here, like he's an angel or something. Then, having stopped believing in us, Samael says, having changed their concept and opinions, they dreamed about us, seeing us changed into devils. Then, which clairvoyance do these people possess? Which one is it? What became of their clairvoyant dreams? What type of clairvoyant is that which today sees us as gods and or angels, and tomorrow affirms that we're devils? Where is the clairvoyance of these dreamers? Why do these people contradict themselves? Why do they swear today that we are gods and tomorrow swear that we are devils? What is this? The subconsciousness is a screen upon which many internal films are projected. I said films. Films are projected. Nowadays, the subconsciousness sometimes acts as a cameraman, other times as a director, and also as a projectionist who projects images into the mental background. So it's clear that our subconscious projector usually commits many errors, and no one ignores that erroneous thoughts or groundless suspicions and also false dreams emerge on the screen of the mind. We need to transform the subconsciousness into consciousness, to stop dreaming, to awaken the consciousness in all states, so you're never really asleep. And whosoever awakens is incapable of dreaming. That's a trippy thought, isn't it? Like, to really be illuminated means in the dream world, you're just as awake as you are now. You're not in the dream world, so to speak, or you're always awake to the dream. And thus, while his physical body sleeps within the bed, he lives in a state of intensified vigilance within the internal worlds, and such people are authentic illuminated seers. Good luck with that. That's tough. We frankly cannot accept clairvoyants who have not awakened their consciousness. We cannot accept clairvoyants who have not engendered the Christ astral or Christ mind and Christ will. Those clairvoyants who have neither awakened consciousness nor possess their Christic vehicles can only see their own beliefs and concepts in the internal worlds. In short, they are useless. Only those awakened clairvoyants, only those clairvoyants who already possess their Christic vehicles are worthy of true credit. They are not dreamers. They do not make mistakes. They are true illuminates. And such people are, in fact, true masters of the White Lodge. The visions of this class of sublime humans are not simple dreams. These are the masters of perfection, and this kind of master cannot dream anymore. This kind of master can investigate the memories of nature and read in the sealed archives of creation all the history of the earth and its races. And everyone who follows the path of the perfect matrimony should live alert and vigilant as watchmen in the time of war. Because during the hours of sleep, the masters test their disciples. Yet the tenebrous ones attack us during sleep when we are working in the great work. Thus, during sleep, we have to pass through many ordeals in the internal worlds. And when the masters are going to test the disciple in something, then they awaken the disciple's consciousness. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Chapter 5 is the key of soul, which is the key of SOL. And he starts it off with, unquestionably, the most important thing in life is the realization of the inner being. And he says that he interrogated the Divine Mother Kundalini. Well, we'll get into that, but I'm going to take a quick break here. Like I said, it's funny to me how these a lot of these same people, whether it be just conscious explorers, out-of-body travelers, dream people, really like the wisest of the wise, people that have really done the work in their belief or whatever it is they believe, there's so many common things when it comes to conscious exploration they all talk about, yet never can come together because they have different creeds, different religions, different spiritual beliefs. And just like William Beelman says, our beliefs will become walls, which will keep us from waking up to each other and to everything else. We'll be right back. This is Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop, here live on the Fringe FM. Stay with us.
Most Haunted Radio. Then, at 7 p.m., the curtain...
That's really weird, man. It says, my thing says YouTube is not responding, but I know we're still live on the station, so I'll keep going and maybe we'll figure that out. No idea. All right. Looks like we're still. I have no idea why it's saying that because we're still live. So we're gonna get back into this. It says the key of soul, and then I'll put this picture up that he has here in the book. I want you guys to remember to keep in mind that this is kind of infested with the Gnostic beliefs of Samael Aun Weor. It's cool, you know, to get into. There's some really cool stuff in here. But whether you believe in Gnosticism, the Great White Lodge, angels, demons, all of that stuff, to me is kind of irrelevant of the point of the fact that when I had my OBE experience, I did some of these stuff, like some of the methods in this book, specifically the one he was talking about, jumping, constantly asking myself if, you know, if I was awake, all that stuff, pretty much lucid dream practices that I guess you could say helped me wake up to the OBE experience. So those practices help you wake up to the OBE experience. Yeah, the Great White Lodge. That's funny. I don't know nothing about all that. Sorry. I mean, I read about it, but whatever. So he says, unquestionably, the most important thing in this life is the realization of the inner being. And once I interrogated my divine mother Kundalini as follows: how is it that the path, this is what he asked, how is it that the path that leads to the resurrection is extremely long? And she answered me and said, it is not that the path is too long, rather that the work with the philosophical stone is very hard. It must be worked and chiseled. It's necessary to give the brute stone a perfectly cubic shape. And our motto is Thelema, meaning willpower. Thelema means willpower, really. Well, there's a whole other religion called Thelema. All right. And so this is a picture that he put in the book, the Divine Mother as depicted by the Greeks as the Virgin Athena with her symbolic serpent, which is really the Hindu Kundalini, and the head of Medusa on her chest. And Medusa represents the inverted Kundalini known as the Kundabuffer, or the tail of Satan. Kundabuffer. It sounds like it sounds like some kind of mythic being. So we must begin by awakening the consciousness. Obviously, all human beings are asleep, and in order to see the path, it is necessary to be awakened. Thus, what is essential is to awaken here and now. Unfortunately, people sleep. It seems incredible, but this is how it is. And we wander in the streets with the consciousness asleep. We're in our house, at our job, the body shop, wherever we're at, the office, with the consciousness profoundly asleep. We drive our car, we go to the factory, and our consciousness is still tremendously asleep. And people are born, they grow, they breed, they get old and die, the whole time having their consciousness asleep, and they never know where they come from nor the objective of their own existence. They don't know anything. And what is most grave in this matter is that all of them believe that they are awake. For instance, many people are preoccupied in knowing many esoteric things, yet they never occupy themselves with the awakening of their consciousness. And if people had the purpose of awakening here and now, then immediately they could know all of that which for them are enigmas. This is why skepticism exists, because the skeptical is ignorant, and ignorance is the outcome of a sleeping consciousness. Man, I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's good to be skeptical. Don't you? I mean, it's good to ask questions instead of just, yeah, man, Samael, you're right. You're right. I believe. Experience, gnosis, I do believe will tell you the truth, though. So indeed, he says, I want to tell you in the name of the truth that skepticism exists because of ignorance. Therefore, the day when the people awaken their consciousness, they will stop being ignorant. And as a fact, skepticism will disappear because ignorance is equal to skepticism and vice versa. So gnosis is not a doctrine that seeks to convince skeptical people, because if today we convince 100 skeptical individuals, tomorrow we have to convince 10,000, and if we convince 10,000, it'll be 100,000 will appear, and who wants to be convinced, and so forth, and it'll never end. So the system to attain the inner realization of the being is a matter of cognizant works and voluntary, you're not going to like this word, voluntary sufferings. Voluntary sufferings? Really? I don't want to suffer. Yet the continuity of purpose in the three factors of the revolution of the consciousness is necessary, and logically, in order to achieve the awakening of consciousness, it's necessary to die from instant to instant, from moment to moment. Let me just check something here real quick. Okay, we're all good. The sleeping person ends up intoxicated when in the presence of a cup of liquor. The sleeping person ends up fornicating when in the presence of the opposite sex, and thus the sleepy ones become identified with everything that surrounds them and forgets about themselves. And from memory, and from my memory at this very moment, I recall the unusual case of, it looks like Pyotr Demonovich Ospensky, who when walking on the streets of St. Petersburg had the resolve to remember himself and not to forget about himself, not even for an instant. And thus he said that as he remembered himself from moment to moment, he even perceived a spiritual aspect within all things. And while this type of spiritual lucidity was increased, he felt his psyche gradually transformed. Nevertheless, something very discouraging happened to him. All of a sudden, he felt the necessity to enter a smoke shop in order to select and order some tobacco. And certainly after being attended and provided with his order of cigars, he left the smoke shop very quietly while smoking along an avenue. So therefore, right after remembering different things and occupied in diverse intellectual matters, etc., he walked through different places of St. Petersburg. In other words, he became absorbed with his own thoughts. And an hour and a half later, already at his home, he observed very well his room, his bedroom, his living room, his desk, etc. And suddenly he remembered that he had first wandered through many places with his consciousness awake. But after having entered into the cigarette shop, his psyche had fallen asleep again. And thus his good intentions of remaining awake from moment to moment were reduced to cosmic dust, and he regretted the incident. He took an hour and a half to reach his home, and during that entire time he regrettably treaded the streets of the city with his consciousness completely asleep. And this is why we say that time speeds up or seems to fly by. Behold, how difficult is it to remain within the consciousness awake from instant to instant, from moment to moment, from second to second. If one has true longings for becoming fully awakened, this is the beginning. One must not forget yourself, not even for a moment. You must keep remembering yourself wherever you are, in any living room or any street, wherever you go, jogging, riding a car, whether it's day or night, wherever one might be at work, in the shop, anywhere. You must remember yourself while at the presence of any beautiful object, or while before any window shop, where very beautiful things are being shown. In other words, you must not become identified with anything that one likes or is captivated by. Good luck with that. I mean, if that's really true, then we're screwed. I wonder what he would say now if he saw like the doom scrolling era. We're just we're just captivated by it all, right? Oh. The person needs to always keep remembering himself, not only his physicality, but one needs to watch one's own thoughts, feelings, emotions, deductions, appendices, fears, longings, especially the longings. So let's talk about the object. So remember, to be conscious is to know objectively where you are, your location, all that stuff, what's going on. So it seems to me that this second aspect, object, is abundantly intriguing because it's related with becoming inquisitive about objects, that is, with not becoming identified with things, as we already stated. Thus, if you see a beautiful object, for example, like a suit within a window stone or a window store or an exposition of something or an exhibition of anything, a very beautiful car, a pair of shoes, anything, what's important is to not become identified with that thing and to know how to distinguish between common things and uncommon things, like a strange animal, an elephant that flies, or a camel that appears in the middle of the living room, etc. The first thing that one needs is to reflect. So what he's getting into here is that if you're kind of like in a zone or captivated by things and you become identified with them, you'll forget that you could, like, you won't even know that you're in a dream. When you're dreaming, you don't know most of the time, unless you become lucid, you don't know that you're dreaming. You become identified with what's going on. You become captivated by it. Even if the dream makes absolutely no sense, at that moment, you're captivated by it. So if your consciousness does that in the dream state, do you not think that you do that in the waking state? And how do you know the difference? Like, are you sleeping or awake right now? Do not become identified with the object or creature that you see, because if one becomes identified with what you see, that is, if you become absorbed by the representation before you, then you will remain fascinated. In other words, you'll pass from identification to fascination. And this is how one remains enchanted, marveled, identified. If you forget yourself, then thereafter one's own consciousness will fall asleep and yet will snooze profoundly. The only thing that you achieve with this mistaken behavior, that is, by allowing yourself to become foolishly fascinated with objects, is to deactivate the consciousness, to put it to sleep. And this is critical, very critical. He says this 5 times, by the way. This is very, very critical. Do not become fascinated with objects. They will deactivate your consciousness and put you to sleep. He says this, and as far as location is concerned, so that was all about objects. Now let's talk about location, because this is going to be important in the dream world. From my memory, at this very moment, I recall another unusual case many years ago when I was traveling through the countries of South America. And since as a traveler, I always walked from one country to another around the world, on a given night it so happened that I saw myself walking through a garden, then into a living room, and through it, and finally I arrived at a lawyer's office where I saw seated at a desk a lady of a certain age with gray hair who amiably attended me, and she stood up and greeted me. And then suddenly I observed that 2 butterflies made of crystal were on the desk. Well, there's nothing odd about seeing 2 butterflies on a desk, right? Yet the intriguing aspect of this matter is that 2 butterflies were alive. Those 2 crystal butterflies were alive. They were moving their wings, their little heads, their little legs, and that's very odd, right? So this was very unusual and intriguing. 2 butterflies made of crystal and alive? These butterflies were not normal. It is clear that they were not natural. He says, my beloved brothers and sisters, this was something odd. It was a case where one has to become very inquisitive. Well then, do you want to know what I did? I did not become identified with a pair of butterflies. I only pondered the following question within myself. How is it possible that there exists in the world butterflies whose bodies are made of crystal, whose head, legs, and wings are made of crystal, and that breathe and have life in the natural ones? Thus, this is how I reflected. What if I had become identified with the butterflies and not pondered an analytical question? Without reflecting on those butterflies made of crystal, what if I had become fascinated by them or enchanted by them, and had fallen into unconsciousness in a deep dream or sleep? Well, that would have been foolish, right? However, I reflected by pondering these statements to myself. No, it's not possible for these types of creatures to exist in the physical world. This is strange. This is odd. This is not normal. Here, I smell something fishy. There is something rare. And this type of phenomenon, as I know, does not exist in the tridimensional world. And since this is only possible in the astral world, it seems that I am in the astral dimension. Could it be that I am in the astral world? Then I question myself. It seems that I am dreaming. It seems that I left my physical body sleeping somewhere, because indeed this is odd. So in order to be sure, I'm going to perform a small jump. Remember the jump that he talked about? In order to be sure, I'm going to perform a small jump with the intention of floating in the environment. This is how I will verify if I'm in my astral body. So let us see what happens. And so this is what I said to myself. With complete confidence, I tell you, this is how I proceeded. It's obvious that I had to proceed in that manner and not in another manner, right? However, I was concerned about jumping in front of the lady. I didn't want to look stupid or silly. So I said to myself, this lady might think that I'm a nutcase if I start jumping up and down in her office. But apparently everything was normal. A desk, like any desk, the chair was where the lady was seated, was one of those that rotate from one side to the other. There were two candelabra in the office, and I remember that one was at the right and the other one was at the left, and they seemed made of gold or some massive gold. I remember this with my entire exactitude, even though it happened a long time ago, many years since I was very young in that epoch. I remember that the candelabra were of 7 branches. It's like a candle holder. And talking here with complete confidence, I did not find anything odd in the room. Everything was normal in that office. But when I focused my sight in on those butterflies, they became the only true questionable oddity there. And as for the rest, I said, there is nothing odd about this lady. She is as normal as other ladies in the world. However, these butterflies make me intrigued. The fact that they were alive on their own accord and very rare, anybody, be it as I resolved to leave the room, would know that this is a little weird. But I left the room with the intention of performing a little jump, because I guess he was worried about what the lady thought. Do you understand? So I had to give an excuse to the lady, and I asked her to consent so if I need to leave. So I told her that I needed to leave the room just for a moment, and I did. I went outside in the corridor, and being sure that no one was looking at me, I performed a long jump with the intention of floating in the environment. And behold, let me tell you what happened. I tell you that I immediately remained floating in the surrounding atmosphere. Now, I felt a delectable sensation. Then I said to myself, I am in my astral body, and here I do not have even the slightest doubt about it. I remember that a few hours before I had left my physical body sleeping in my bed and displacing myself there in the astral world, I had arrived to that place and to that office. So here's the thing that I want to say about this. There's a lot of different things you can do to become lucid. But this jumping technique that he's talking about, as weird as it is, like as stupid as it would be if you were to jump in front of people that know you, right? It is probably the most effective thing as far as like helping you to become out of body when you're in a dream state. I don't know why. There's something about flying with that whole thing. And here's another thing you got to think about. You never remember, like when you're in a dream, most of the time you never remember how it started. You never remember where it began. You don't even remember a blackness or a phase in between. It's just all of a sudden you're there. You don't have no idea how you got there, when it started, what was going on. But when he did this technique, this jump to float technique, he remembered and could remember leaving his body all the way back to when he fell asleep, when he left his body, etc., etc. So he said, then when I went back to the office, I sat again before the lady and spoke to her with much respect. I told her, be aware, ma'am, that we are both, us, are in the astral body. So he's telling her that we're both in the astral body. Wondered with sleepy eyes as a somnambulist. That lady scarcely looked at me, and she did not understand. She did not comprehend. Nevertheless, I wanted to clarify the situation for her, and I told her, ma'am, remember that a few hours ago you went to bed to lay down in order to sleep. Therefore, do not wonder why I am telling you this. Listen, your physical body is sleeping in your bed, and you are here talking with me in the astral world. Yes, definitely that lady did not understand. She was profoundly asleep. She had her consciousness asleep. So thus, upon seeing that everything was useless, comprehending that she would not awaken, not even with cannon shots, since that wretched lady had never dedicated herself to the labor of awakening of her consciousness, then frankly, my dear brothers and sisters, I resolved to apologize and left. Or perhaps, I don't know why you saw a silver-haired lady in a lawyer's office, but perhaps, Samael, I'm just throwing this out there, that maybe she wasn't another person in an astral body. Maybe she was a character in your dream, and that was another part of you. I'm just saying that could be it. Who knows? But according to his book here, he's saying that he met another person in this realm, and they had no idea what he was talking about. I think that would be pretty cool if that was the case. So as a curious thing, I want to narrate for you that many years after, maybe 30 years or more, I traveled to Taxco, Guerrero, Mexico. It's a very beautiful town situated over a hill and built in the colonial style. Its streets are stone paved as in the epoch of the colonization, and it's very rich indeed. It has many silver mines and many beautiful objects and jewelry made of silver and sold there. I had to travel to that town because someone I was making some remedies for lived there. He wanted to be healed and wanted me to help him in his healing process. And he was a wretched patient, very sick. And I arrived at a house, I crossed a garden and arrived at a living room, which I recognized immediately. There was a lady there. I looked at her and recognized her, and she was the same lady that I'd seen behind that desk many years ago in the astral world. However, this time she was in the living room. All right, well, touché, I stand corrected. She invited me to pass into another room where I found the already mentioned lawyer's office that he'd never seen before, now he's seeing, where I so many years ago had arrived in my astral body. Yet now, instead of the lady behind the desk, it was her husband, a very well-educated man who, without a title, was dedicated to the law, and in some places these people are called interns. We call them as you please, but the fact was that he was seated there in the office. He stood in order to welcome me, and therefore he invited me to sit down in front of his desk, and so I had immediately recognized the office and the lady years later. Then it so happened that because that man liked a little these sort of spiritual studies, we talked and conversed for a while on these matters, and he liked everything related with the esoteric studies. And then I surprised him when I told him this. Sir, I was here some time ago. I was out of my physical body, in my astral body. And you know that one moves, walks, and goes from one place to another. This gentleman already knew a little bit about these things, so my statement was not unusual to him. And then I told him, see on this desk over here, there were 2 butterflies made of crystal. What happened? Where are those butterflies? And he quickly answered me. Well, here are the butterflies right here. Look at them. He then raised some newspapers that were upon the desk, and certainly there they were, the 2 very beautiful crystal butterflies. Of course, he was very astounded that I knew about those butterflies. And then I told him, but something else is missing. I see on the candle holder of 7 arms, yet I saw 2. Where is the other? What happened to it? Oh, here's the other one. Look at it. The gentleman in his office answered me. He then removed some papers and newspapers that he had there, and indeed he showed me the other candle holder. Yet it appeared in order to confirm my assertions even more. Of course, the man was amazed, and I told him, I want you to know that I know your wife, because when I came here, your wife was at the desk. Well, the gentleman was amazed. And that at dinner time, we were seated at a round table and something truly unexpected happened. In the presence of her husband, the lady told me, hey, I met you a long time ago. I don't know where or when, but I think that we've met before. But I have seen you, yes, I've seen you before in some place. Anyhow, you're not an unknown person to me. And then I immediately elbowed the gentleman and told him, do you realize it? Are you convinced from my words now? See? Well, the amazement of that man reached its maximum. Unfortunately, and this indeed is what is very critical, that man was so attached to his sect, we might call a type of Romanist sect, I guess, that frankly speaking, he did not enter into the path due to the sectarian matters of his religion. But otherwise, he would have come to the path because I gave him extraordinary evidence that for him were factual and definite. At least he became forever amazed. Regrettably, his beliefs did not allow him, and they confused him. He became entangled in all these religious dogmas. But many years have already passed, and nevertheless, I still have been able to narrate this event for you. I remember every detail even to this day. I never forgot it. This is why I recommend to you the division of attention into 3 parts. 1. Subject. That is to say, oneself. Never forget yourself, not even for an instant, no matter what you're doing. Never. 2. Object. To observe all things, as in the case of the butterflies that I have narrated to you. What if this very moment in which you are reading this book, a person that died many years ago arrived to your home and spoke to you? Would you be so naive? Would you be so absent-minded as you do not ask yourself, what is this? Could it be that I am in my astral body? Would you be as reckless as to not to do the experiment and to give a little jump? Well then, do not forget that in any detail, as insignificant as it may appear to you, must be enough in order to perform this type of inquisition. Thus, every object must be studied in detail, and thereafter one must ask oneself, why am I here? So, subject and then object. Study every object and ask yourself why you're there. And number 3, location or place. You must not live unconsciously. When we arrive at any place, we must observe it in detail, very minutely, and thereafter ask ourselves, why am I here in this place? And by the way, you that are reading this book, tell me, did you already ask yourself, why are you there in that place where you are reading the book or listening to the radio show? Did you already inconvenience yourself to observe that place, the ceiling, the walls, the TV, the phone, the space that surrounds you? Are you already observing the floor or the place up and down to the sides, behind you and in front of you? Did you look at the walls and your surroundings in order to ask the question, where am I? And if you did not do it, why don't you try? Or perhaps you're reading this book unconsciously. It is clear that you must never live unconsciously, no matter where you are, in a house, on the street, in a temple, or even in a taxi or sea, airplane, etc. Wherever you may be, wherever you are to be found, the first thing that you must ask yourself is, why am I here in this place? Look minutely at everything that surrounds you, the ceilings, the walls, the floor. Observation is not only for the park, the house, or an unknown place, but one must do it daily, all the time. Look at your house as if it were something new or unknown. Do so every time and every moment that you enter into it. You must also ask yourself, why am I in this house? What a strange house. Then look at the ceiling, the walls, and the ground, the patio, everything in detail. Ask yourself the question, why am I in this place? Could it be that I'm in my astral body? Perform a little extended jump with the intention of floating in every environment. If you do not float, but still feel that you are in your astral body, then go stand on top of a chair or on top of a low table. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm not telling you that this is just in the book. I don't want you guys going on jumping on tables and saying, oh, and falling. A strong box or something of the sort, and jump in the air with the intention of floating. Sometimes one performs the extended jump and nevertheless you won't float. So you might, because your consciousness is in kind of a conflicted state, you might float for a second and then fall. The best solution is to go and stand on something that allows us to jump in the air in order to hover in the environment. And when you jump with the intention of flying. And it is clear that if one is in the astral world, you will remain floating in the environment, and then one returns to the ground. Is anybody, I just totally got that freaking Matrix vibe for a second. Like when Trinity kind of did her jump, Do not forget the division of attention into 3 parts, always. It took us 5 chapters to get to this point. Subject, object, location. If you become accustomed to live with the attention divided into these 3 parts, subject, object, and location, if you become habituated to do it daily at every moment, from instant to instant, from second to second, then this habit becomes recorded deeply in the consciousness, and at night, when your physical body sleeps, one performs the exercise in the astral world, and you'll do the same thing. in your physical body and in the astral body until it becomes a buried program. And the outcome is the awakening of your consciousness. You know that often at night you repeat in dreams the same thing that you usually do during the day, a lot of times. For example, during the day, many work in a factory or a traveling salesman or in an office. And then at night, during their dreams, they see themselves working, doing exactly the same thing and that they're doing during the day. And they'll totally forget they even had a dream. They dream that they are in the factory or selling or in the office or something. It's clear that everything you do during the day, you repeat during the night. That is to say, you dream the same thing at night. So it's a matter of performing this practice during the day at every hour, every moment, every second, as much as you can in order to achieve it during the night and awaken your consciousness. It's clear that when any person is physically sleeping, the essence, the consciousness is far from the physical body. And it so happens that when the essence is outside the physical body, it acts within the astral body and repeats the same thing that it does during the day. And this is how you can awaken automatically, because the practice of this exercise gives a spark or shock to your consciousness, which then remains awake. When you're ready, or when you already awake in the astral world, you can invoke the masters, for example. You can call on the angel Anael, or the angel Adonai, the child of light and happiness, or the master Kuthumi. They can come to you to instruct you, to teach you. Likewise, you can call on any other master, namely Moria, the Count of Saint Germain, etc. And those who invoke me, they can be sure that I will concur to their call. I'm not going to be invoking anybody, especially Samael Aun Weor. But it's pretty cool to know what he's saying. And so therefore, I give you the system in order to receive the teachings directly. And if you want to remember your past lives, then invoke the masters of the White Lodge, Kuthumi, Hilarion Moria, etc., and ask them to have the amiability, the kindness to help you to remember your former existence, to help you to recall your lives, so you can be sure that the masters will grant you such a petition. This system that I'm giving to you all is in order for you to receive the direct knowledge so you can travel to eastern Tibet. You can also go to the depth of the oceans, including to other planets if you want to. This is the way to receive direct knowledge. This is why I tell you. Awaken, my dear brothers and sisters, awaken. Do not continue living your life as unconscious or asleep individuals, as this is very sad. Behold the sleepy souls, how they walk unconsciously in the astral world, and after death they continue asleep, unconscious, and dreaming foolishness. They are born without knowing at what time they die, without knowing at what time. I do not want that you continue like this, within that terrible unconsciousness. I want you to awaken. Well, that's pretty sweet of him. Let's see, chapter 6. This might be the last one till we get on out of here. This is a small book, actually. It's only 100 pages. We're already on like 35. Those candidates who sincerely long for a mystical direct experience must unquestionably begin with the dream yoga discipline. The Gnostic must be very demanding with himself and learn to create favorable conditions to remember and understand all those inner experiences that always occur during sleep. Man, he takes a long time to get into stuff, doesn't he? That sucks. Before retiring to your bed at the end of your daily routine, it's advisable to pay attention to the state you're in. Devotees whose circumstances make them lead a sedentary life will gain a lot if, before going to bed, they have a short but very lively walk outdoors. A walk will relax your muscles, and I must clarify, however, that we must never abuse physical exercise. We need to live in harmony. Supper, or the final meal of the day, must be light and free of heavy or stimulating foods. Foods that keep us awake or alter our sleep should be avoided. The highest way of thinking is not thinking. When the mind is quiet and silent, free of daily routine and mundane anxiety, it is then in a state that is 100% favorable for the dream yoga practice. When the superior emotional center is actually working, the thinking process stops, at least for a brief moment. Evidently, the sided center is activated with Dionysian intoxication, and such rapture is possible when listening with infinite devotion to the delightful symphonies of Wagner, Mozart, Chopin, or others. Beethoven's music is especially extraordinary because it makes the superior emotional center vibrate intensely. The sincere Gnostic finds it in a vast field for mystical exploration, for it is not music of form, but of archetypal ineffable ideas. Ineffable ideas. Every note has a meaning, every pause is a superior emotion. Beethoven, when feeling the cruel rigors and trials of the spiritual night, instead of failing, as many candidates did, open the eyes of his intuition to the mysterious supernatural, the spiritual side of nature, to the region where angelic kings of these universal creations, Tlaloc, Eekatol, Huenitol, etc. I don't even know who those people are, so I'm just trying to pronounce them. Were these creatures or these creations live? Observe the musician philosopher all along his exemplary existence. On top of his table, he always had in plain view his divine mother Kundalini, the ineffable Nath, Anuaz, Tonatizen, or supreme Egyptian Isis. Is he still talking about Beethoven? This is the picture that he's showing here. Hold on. It is said that the great master had an inscription at the base of the adorable sculpture, written with his own hand, that mysteriously asserted, quote, "I am she who has been and will be. No mortal life or no mortal has lifted my veil." Revolutionary and inner progress is impossible without the immediate aid of our Divine Mother. Grateful children must love their mothers. Beethoven loved his greatly. And outside the physical body during the hours of sleep, the soul can talk to her Divine Mother. We must, however, begin with dream yoga discipline. We need to take care of the bedroom where we sleep. It must be pleasantly decorated. The colors best suited for the goal that we seek, in spite of what other authors recommend, are precisely the three primary hues: blue, yellow, and red. The three basic colors constantly correspond to the three primary forces of nature. So, I don't know how to pronounce this, but he calls it the holy triamazikano, the holy affirmation, the holy negation, and the holy consolation. Let us remember that these three original forces of this great creation always crystallize in positive, negative, and neutral forces. And so he's talking about, in Gnostic terms, the top of the tree of life there. These three basic colors correspond to these primary forces. The causarum of the holy, triamazakino, is found hidden in the active element, the ray of creation. The latter, in and of itself, and only the emanations of the sacred solar absolute. Obviously, if we reject the three fundamental colors, having given the above explanations, we become, by simply logical deductions, foolish. Dream yoga is extraordinary, marvelous, and formidable. It is, however, very demanding. The bedroom has to be perfumed and ventilated, but not pervaded with the cold night temperature. And after undergoing detailed and careful preparation of himself for bed and of the room where he will sleep, a Gnostic must take care of his bed. If we observe any compass, we can see that the needle always points to the north. It is then possible to consciously take advantage of the planet's magnetic current, which always flows from south to north. A bed should be placed in such a way that his head is facing north, and this way we can intelligently use the magnetic current indicated by the needle. The mattress should be neither too hard nor too soft. This means that its texture must in no way affect the psychic process of the sleeping person. Squeaking bed springs or a base that cracks with every small movement of the body are serious obstacles for these practices. A pad or a notebook and a pencil should be placed under the pillow so that they can easily be found even in the dark. Bedclothes must be fresh and clean. The pillowcase must be scented with our favorite perfume. And after having met these requirements, the ascetic Gnostic will be ready for the second stage of his esoteric discipline. He will get into bed and, having turned off all the lights, will lay on his back with his eyes closed and place both hands on his solar plexus. He will be totally quiet for some time, and once he is completely relaxed physically as well as mentally, he will concentrate on Morpheus, the god of sleep. I should have had a clip from the Matrix here. Unquestionably, each part of our real being has specific tasks. It is precisely Morpheus. Do not confuse this with Orpheus, who is in charge of training us in the mysteries of sleep. It is impossible to trace a layout of our being. Nevertheless, all the spiritual isolated parts of that being want to achieve absolute perfection in their tasks. Morpheus enjoys this unique opportunity we provide when we concentrate on him. We must know how to supplicate and have faith. We must ask Morpheus to teach us and to awaken us in the supersensitive worlds. And by this time, the esotericist Gnostic feels a very special somnolence, and then he adopts the lion posture. Lying on his right side with his head pointing north, he moves his legs slowly so that his knees are bent, and in this posture, the left leg rests on top of the right one. He then places his right cheek on his right palm and lets his left arm rest on the left leg. When one wakes up, one should not move, because any movement shakes up our values, and then the memory of our dreams is lost. A retrospective exercise is needed in those moments when we want to remember our dreams. Take notes in your notebook carefully of the details of the dream, or dreams in the notebook or pad which you place under your pillow. In this way, you'll always be able to have a detailed record of your inner progress in dream yoga. Even if there are only vague fragments of the dream or dreams in your memory, record them, write them down. And when nothing is left in your memory, the retrospective exercise must be based on the first thought we had at the moment we awakened. That thought obviously relates to the last dream. We must point out that the retrospective exercise should start before completely coming back to the vigil state, when we are still drowsy, to try to follow the dream sequence. The practice of that exercise always starts with the last image that we had moments before coming back to the awakened or vigil state. We will conclude this chapter with a serious statement that it is not possible to go beyond this stage of dream yoga discipline unless we have obtained the perfect memory of our dream experiences. And he says to go into special nourishment to develop the power of your memory. So prepare your breakfast with acid fruits and ground almonds along with honey, like bee honey. And this way you'll provide the brain with all the necessary atoms for your memory. Man, do I got time to do one more of these? Because the next one's called the Tantric Dream. A lot of this stuff seems like ridiculous, but I'm telling you, I used some of it and it worked. It worked like a charm. Okay. So chapter 7, Tantric Dream. So we should review our pad or notebook every month in order to verify the gradual progression of our dream memory. Any possibility of forgetting a dream must be eliminated. We cannot continue further with practice unless we have achieved perfect memory. Of particular interest are those dreams which seem to come from past centuries or that unfold in environments totally unrelated to the waking state of the dreamer. You must be watchful or perceptive or alert. Remember to be conscious anew. and pay attention to the study of details, which include specific matters, conversations, meetings, temples, or unusual activities which relate to other people. Once the total development of the dream memory is achieved and any possibility of lack of memory is eliminated, the symbolism process will open the way to the revelation. You must seek the basic science of interpretation of dreams in the law of philosophical analogies, the law of the opposites analogies, and the law of correspondence and numerology. The astral images reflected in the magical mirror of imagination can never be translated literally, for these are only the symbolic representations of archetypal ideas. They must be utilized in the same way as a mathematician uses algebraic symbols. Furthermore, we can say that such ideas come down from the pure world of spirit. The archetypal ideas descending from the beings are marvelous, for they inform us about the psychological status of any center of the human machine, about esoteric or intimate matters, or about possible successes or dangers. These are always wrapped in the marvelous cover of symbolism. It's also possible to unveil any of the astral symbols, scenes, or figures, with the goal of taking out their essential ideas only by means of the correlative and logical meditation of being. On reaching the state of dream yoga discipline, it's indispensable to approach the tantric aspect of the matter. Ancient wisdom teaches that the divine kundalini, our divine cosmic individual mother, each of us has our own, can take any form, for she is the origin of all forms, and therefore the Gnostic should meditate upon her before falling asleep. The candidate will start his dreaming process by repeating daily with great faith the following prayer: "My mother, come to me, or Tanatitsin Tetanean, or something like that. You can say it in English, though. And according to the tantric science, if the Gnostic persists with this practice, sooner or later, an initiator element will come forth from the changing and formless expression of his dreams. As long as this initiator has not been totally identified, it is indispensable to continue recording dreams on the pad or notebook. The study and profound analysis of every recorded dream becomes indispensable in tantric dream esoteric discipline. The didactic progression will lead us to the discovery of the initiator or unifier element of the dreams. The sincere Gnostic who reaches this stage of tantric discipline, for this reason, ready for the next step, will be the topic of our next chapter. How long is the next chapter? It's not very long. Okay. So apparently in Gnosticism, we all have a divine mother that's trying to unite with us or teach us something, I guess. That's what I'm saying, man. There's different Gnostic systems, but this one's always been like super interesting to me. This is called the return practice. So when the beginner has successfully performed all Gnostic exercises related to tantric dreams, he is clearly ready for the, quote, return practice. In the previous chapter, we mentioned the initiator element that comes forth as if by magic from within the changing and formless expressions of your dreams. Now, some people who are highly psychic, refined, or susceptible to impressions have always possessed in themselves the initiator element. And these people are characterized by the continuous repetition of the same dream. These psychics periodically relive various scenes or constantly see in their dreams experience a creature or symbol. And every time the candidate wakes up from ordinary sleep and remembers the initiator element, be it a symbol, a sound, a color, a person, animal, etc., he keeps his eyes closed and goes on with the visualization of that familiar image. He will then try to go back to sleep to continue the same dream. In other words, the aspirant tries to be conscious of his own dream. That is why he intentionally goes on with it, but carries it to the vigil state in full lucidity and self-control. He becomes a spectator and actor of a dream with the advantage, certainly not insignificant, of being able to abandon the scene at will in order to move freely in the astral world. when the aspirant, free of the limitations of the flesh, outside the physical body, will have discarded his old familiar environment and penetrated a universe ruled by different laws entirely. The disciple of the dream state of Tantric Buddhists methodically leads us to the awakening of our consciousness. Gnostics can awaken to the real state of illumination only through the understanding and elimination of dreams. Sacred scriptures from Hindustan solemnly assert that the whole world is Brahma's dream, that we're all living in a dream. And having this Hindu postulate as a base, let us emphasize that when Brahma awakens, his dream will end. And as long as the aspirant does not achieve the radical dissolution, not only of dreams, but of their psychological generators as well, absolute awakening is impossible. The definite awakening of the consciousness is possible only by means of a radical transformation. The four Christic Gospels insist on the necessity of awakening. Unfortunately, people are still asleep. Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican Christ, was certainly a man who was 100% awakened. The multiplicity of his attributes points us to precisely the antiquity of his cult and the profound veneration he received in Mesoamerica. The holy gods of the Anuak are perfect men in the strictest sense of the word. They are absolutely awakened, and those beings eradicated even the possibility of dreams from their psyche. And this Tlaloc, he who makes sprouting, the god of the rain and lightning, being a god, is also an awakened man who had to eliminate from his psyche not only his dreams, but also all possibilities of dreaming. This dude here. He is the principal sacred individual of the ancient Olmec culture. He is always depicted with the tiger serpent's mask and colossus axes and various jade figures. He has these Tetzcatlipoca and Huitzilopocatli. I don't know how to say these words. That's the redneck version of the words. Being of fire, living representations of night and day are also awakened men, beings who went beyond their dreams. And outside his physical body, an awakened individual can invoke the holy gods of the Aztecs, Mayans, Zapotecs, Toltecs, and others. The gods of Borgia, Bourbon, and other codices come to help those who awaken. By means of the help of the holy gods, the awakened person can study the secret doctrine of Anuak in the astral light. I have no idea what that is. I wish I could tell you what that means, but maybe I'll look into it later. I'm going to end it right there, and we'll finish the book later. I mean, we're about halfway done with it, but man, all these different beliefs and all these gods, and I am really, really careful with this stuff because I don't personally I don't guess I would consider myself a Gnostic per se. I just find it interesting that whether I'm studying Kabbalah, Gnosticism, some Eastern methods, I guess you could say Tattva, any of these things, or just reading Robert Monroe's books, there's always like 5 to 6 things that I keep coming across that I keep, I want to do a video on it or a show on it one day, like these things that I keep running across that all these people are saying about either OBEs or waking up consciously or things like that, because I think that it's all getting in the way. And I would even say Thomas Campbell, as much as that guy's way smarter than me, he's far more intellectually smarter than me, I would say, but I still think that he has like a simulation kind of mathematical, scientific, very I guess you could say rational belief about how everything works, which is fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. But none of these people, if you're paying attention, like really paying attention, none of these people have 100% at all lined up beliefs about astral travel, the out-of-body experience, I guess NDEs, but they all have a lot of things that they say in common that they're all experiencing, which has to be close to the truth. I guess the biggest thing I would take away from all of that is that there is a consciousness outside of your physical body. This this thing that you think you are in this physical body really is, whether it be a dream like Samael Aun Weor is talking about, it really is almost like a figment of your imagination. This idea of who you are and your image and all this ego stuff really is kind of a phase and some other thing that's happening. The four people that I know that say a lot of the same things is Robert Monroe, Robert Bruce, Muldoon from the 1920s, and William Buellman. And most of those guys, I mean, Robert Bruce is a little bit spiritual, but most of those guys are pretty much talking about a consciousness at different stages and the etheric projection. But if you take the stuff that he's talking about out of this book, which in my opinion will activate the right brain, at the very least, the jumping exercise, the notebook, setting up your dream temple, which is your bedroom kind of thing, these things will help your conscious exploration and your travel for sure. Anyways, off to the Great White Lodge. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week. We'll finish it off. Maybe the weekend, depending on what happens. Depending on what happens. Until then, until next time, keep it live on the Fringe FM. Love you guys. Night, night, sweet dreams. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other mainly.